So it seems that we've got another rather enormous Warhammer 40k model reveal with the counterpart release for the Chaos Knights. Let's take a look at the Siege Driller and Flamer-toting Big Knight in the Ruinator, talk about Games Workshop's teasers for it and what it's likely to do on the tabletop. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Chaos Knights, and in particular about the big bad Knight Ruinator. Games Workshop have basically given us the heads up that this thing was coming. The words that they used in the Thousand Suns preview article the other day were a malevolent reveal, clunky and whirring over the horizon, and to me that sounded very unlikely it was going to be anything else than the new Chaos Knight they've shown us off in loads of teasers, and indeed here we are. Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights aren't too far away in the Warhammer 40k release schedule. We've just had Death Guard and World Eaters ship out. This week is the pre-order for Thousand Suns, and apparently it looks like we have Space Wolves after that. Then we're into the next section, basically Knights of all different shapes and sizes really. Grey Knights, Black Templars, Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights. Kind of makes me wonder if that knightly grouping is deliberate. The Knights have previously often had a sort of 2-in-1 release with the Imperials. I think in general that makes sense within an edition to have them come out at the same time, as otherwise you might be in a slightly awkward situation where some Knights have updated stat lines and some don't, and it all feels a bit weird when ideally you'd want to compare them one for one. I'd guess that both codexes will probably come out at the same sort of time, maybe most likely in sort of July to August sort of times, judging by Games Workshop's reveal horizons normally. Recently we had the reveal of the Knight Defender for the Imperials, basically a Questoris chassis variant with a big plasma weapon, a conversion beam cannon, and a shield generator to shroud nearby knights from enemy fire. And they told us how it was going to be released in its own alternative box set to Canis Rex and the Preceptor, where you'll be able to build one of those variants out of that box and then this one out of the other. Given that both the Questoris Knight box set and also the standard Chaos Knight Abominant set have been out of production for quite some time, it did seem likely that the Chaos Knights were getting a similar sort of treatment, and indeed that does appear to be the case. For the Chaos Knight range so far in Warhammer 40k, it's really quite a small compact one. They only really have the one Abhorrent Knight kit, I guess soon to be two with this one, plus their War Dog kit as their dedicated models. They're all quite flexible and really quite well done modular kits, plus they're able to borrow a whole bunch of Imperial variants, both the standard Questoris one to make a Despoiler and the Dominus Knight kit to make a Tyrant, plus they can dip into the Sevastus chassis from the Horus Heresy if they want to, but still it's an army range that really doesn't have all that many options in, so any expansion is welcome I guess. For this one we did already have a bunch of teasers that almost amounted to the full model reveal in itself. These had come from their rumour engines, and while a bunch of them are often hard to decipher whether or not they're one faction or another, all three of these looked more likely to be Chaos Knights rather than everything else, both the scaling on the first two parts with the big Siege Drill and then the Flamer, and quite clearly having some Chaos Knight spiky bits on the edges. And then the latest one was this missile pod, which you could also tell exactly what it was, because they kept in the little cowling bits in the same place as heavy stubbers would go. In any case, it looks like it all comes together in the Ruinator, a great big Siege Drill and Flamer attack with a bunch of missile pods, and it's apparently set to do some nasty damage up close. Before we talk a bit more about the model teasers and Codex though, I'll just give a quick shout out to Warhaus, the video sponsor, a relatively new gaming store in Brisbane, Australia. They've just opened in April 2025, and if you live down under they can be one way to save a fair bit of money versus Games Workshop's normal prices, 23% off their flat rates, which is definitely sorely needed for the big rates that they charge down there. I'll link their website below if you'd like to check them out. They're easy to navigate and generally aim to have good numbers of pre-orders in the past, and you can do the normal things for discount retailers with them, back ordering things if they're not in stock. They've got a War Points program to allow you to accumulate yet more discounts, and they also have the typical free shipping over orders of $150 or more. The store's now open in Corinda outside Brisbane if you are nearby and want to check them out. They've got good stock levels, a few of which you can see here, plus a couple of full-size gaming tables that are available for public use. They've got some monthly giveaways via their Instagram page, which I'll also link below. This was last month one for April. I'm sure I'll be having something suitable for this month though, so give their socials a follow if you want to be notified for that. In any case, a big thank you to them for sponsoring the video. Feel free to check them out if you live down in Australia, down in the video description below. Let's get back to that fancy Chaos Knight though. As mentioned, it's the Knight Ruinator, a new option for the Abhorrent Knight to be assembled as this, and Games Workshop gave us a small lore snippet about it. Apparently short-range butchers who set their sights on a given prey and then go and hunt it down. I feel like with the sort of Knight and Chaos Knight suits, I guess the main choices are one of war gear, and then have a small splash of lore as to how they tend to operate with their household formation or the character of their pilots. But ultimately I feel like they're more clearly defined just by being big stompy Chaos Knights, marching towards you to break some followers of the False Emperor. The weapons it's armed with are the mighty Dark Flame Lance, the great big massive flame weapon, and then in its other hand that Siege Drill is called a Fellbore. kind of reminiscent of Centurion style siege drills or Leviathan ones. It does feel like it's maybe got a bit of an overlap for role with the Knight Acheron really. That one's also armed with a flame cannon and a melee weapon that's maybe supposed to be fairly anti-armor with a chain fist, so maybe some similarities there. This one also has those rocket pods as well, and they describe those as being called Terrapulse missiles. As well as that, it looks like the new frame will have a few more aesthetic details as well. I believe that faceplate is a new one, an all very warped and corrupted and rather creepy looking one. So I think all that piping on the top and the banner are both existing parts from the previous kits. Let me know if any of the other aesthetic upgrades are anything different though. Otherwise I guess it's literally just the weapons, the missile pods, and I think the faceplate. For its model's looks, I think it looks nice enough, but basically it's ultimately just a Chaos Knight with different weapons. Maybe not hugely different, though still very exciting to have some different war gear choices to be able to feel with it. And as with the Imperial one, apparently it's going to be sold as 2 separate box sets. One being the Knight Abominant box set for the Psycho one with the Electro Scourge Whip and the Big Volkite, and then the other box will be able to make this one, and I guess both of them will also be able to assemble as either the Rampager or Desecrator. The previous Questoris or Abhorrent price tags were £110, $178 or €145, so it seems likely it'll be that unless Games Workshop managed to fit in one of their price rises beforehand. As is often the case with Imperial and Chaos Knight wargear options though, it's perfectly possible that you could use other bits to proxy or convert. I guess you could potentially just use the Knight Tyrant's Flame Cannon, if magnetised, to attach to the Flamer Arm, and then either use the Gauntlet or convert a great big drill out of some bits potentially. It might be possible to convert these super cheap if you have magnetised up your miniatures. For the weapons, unfortunately there's no real rules previews at the moment. They're given 40k stat lines. Just in general throughout the game we can make some pretty safe guesses as to them, and they did give us just a few small soft rules teasers. That Dark Flame Lance is stated to be a match for the Knight Tyrant's 3-barreled one. The current rules for that one pre-Codex are 18-inch range, 3d6 torrent hits with strength 8, AP 1 and damage 2 and ignores cover. Basically pretty brutal at clearing out enemy medium infantry formations, very nice against things like standard Space Marines, but typically Knightly Flame weapons haven't tended to be all that strong recently. It kind of feels like they were priced to be able to do Overwatch early in the edition, and that's hampered them ever since. It might just literally have very similar stats, or it could get fewer shots like the Acheron has, maybe 2d6 versus 3d6, though I certainly bear in mind that they could well tweak the profiles in the Codex. Then for the Siege Drill, just from the appearance of it, it's almost certainly got to have a preference for boring into armoured targets. I guess compared with most knightly targets, it's going to have a very high strength and very high damage attacks, but probably not that many of them. I'm guessing that if it has a sweep mode, it might be a bit more limited, and it's probably not going to be quite as efficient against infantry style targets as most knights out there. I guess it's probably going to be the exact sort of thing that you want to be charging into enemy Imperial and Chaos Knights with though. Finally, for the Terrapulse missile pods, from the appearance it looks like they're more likely to be in an anti-infantry style role, though I guess they could be treated as crack rockets in game if Games Workshop wanted to. They describe them as big enough to burst through a Space Marine, maybe something like mid-strength, damage 2, AP 1. That'd likely be my first instincts with those kind of things, though I guess they could surprise. Finally, just from the lore teaser, that almost sounded more like it was a datasheet teaser rather than a lore-specific one. Quite a lot of units in 10th edition have a sort of quarry special rule, where you pick a target at the start of the game, and then until that target's slain, you get damage buffs against that target. If and when it's eventually brought low, you get to choose something else. Just given what they talked about it seems very likely that it might get that. I guess occasionally could be helpful if it's a big scary unit that the opponent has to put into the midboard, though potentially having short range, it might just have a bit more trouble getting to grips with the thing that it wants to kill most, compared with if it was a longer range knight class. I guess could potentially play some mind games with the opponent though, if that damage buff is very significant, and it makes them want to play more wary with one of their biggest scariest units. Obviously far too early to say whether or not it will be good in game, and that depends entirely on the points cost. I must admit, just from the weapons alone, I'm perhaps just a little bit less hopeful compared with some knights that it's going to be reliably a good one, Codex on Codex, mixing anti-infantry ranged attacks with dedicated anti-armor melee attacks, and a focus down one unit special rule. Maybe doesn't feel like the single most helpful combo on paper, though obviously in reality it all depends on the 4 rules and the points. Any knight could be a strong or weak one, depending on the points cost that Games Workshop eventually wind up giving it. Talking of rules reveals though, they also gave us the Codex cover and a few small hints for Codex Chaos Knights, though a few less than the Imperials. Looks like on the cover for this one, it's a Knight Abominant fighting alongside some Chaos Space Marines. You can see the Electro Scourge and the great big glowing Volkite there. Looks like quite fun cover art to me. I think most players' hopes for Chaos Knights might be that at least for the competitive side of the game, they give you a lot more reason to play something that isn't Wardog spam. For reasons unknown, Games Workshop has basically left Wardog spam as the single best way to play Chaos Knights for basically the entire last 3 years since they came out in 9th edition and onwards. The Wardogs are a cool kit, but it's definitely got tiresome for a bunch of people that the biggest, coolest knights in their collection aren't really living up to being the centerpieces and standout damage dealers of the army. It looks like for this detachment preview, they didn't say the numbers of detachments they'd get. The Imperials are getting 4 apparently, so most likely to be the same. We haven't had a standalone codex that has had less than 4 yet, just these Space Marine supplement style ones. It's a chance for them to rewrite unit profiles if they want to. We saw a whole bunch of very different ones on packaging, but these could have been old draft ones for all we know, and might not necessarily represent the ones that are coming in the codex. In my opinion, the extra wound count and slightly lower toughness values didn't really seem to change loads in my opinion anyway. And like the Imperials, they're very likely to have no combat patrol in the book, and if they're going by the same style as them, that'll mean that they get an extra section on painting and heraldry in place of that. Otherwise, at the same time for the Chaos Knights, it seems likely that there's going to be a great big War Dog Battle Force box set too. That one had been rumoured previously, though I've seen some independent things to verify that. It does seem that that's happening. I'm sure current existing Chaos Knight collectors won't have too much use for that if they've already gone heavy into War Dogs, as they're being pushed to do for editions now. But could still be handy enough for newer collectors getting a bunch of the little guys and then adding in the big guys of their choice. On top of that, they'll have the usual dice and datasheet cards. For reception to the new miniature, it seems well enough received. I feel like there's not really too much to dislike about it. Great big siege drill, great big flamer, fairly cool looking knight overall. Might have been interesting if they'd added a few more different things to the Abhorrent chassis. I suppose they went a bit more out there with the Abhorrent being a Psycho Knight. In general, it's still nice to get some extra stuff for them though, even if it's maybe not quite as big a deal as an entire new Knight chassis, or something else more out there might have been. In any case, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the new Knight Ruinator down in the comments below. What do you make of the model, and what do you think its chances are of being good in game are or not? I look forward to hearing your takes down in the comments below. I'll certainly look forward to covering any rules previews that they happen to give of it at a later date. Otherwise, a big thank you to Warhaus for sponsoring the video. Feel free to check them out, links down in the video description below. They can help with some big savings on Warhammer miniatures down under. I'll link their Instagram and website. Otherwise, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. If you've been enjoying a lot, then feel free to support on the channel's Patreon page if you'd like to. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, including occasionally seeing videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways, with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.